And today finds me on the banks of the Hudson River. This is in Rockland County, New York. We're at what's called Nyack Beach State Park here. And we're going to be ascending Hook Mountain, which rises abruptly from the west bank of the Hudson River here. We're just about 3 miles north of the Tappan Zee Bridge, which is several miles long. This is the widest point in the Hudson River, 3 or 4 miles across. In the west bank of the Hudson River, from basically the George Washington Bridge northward, is lined by what's called the Palisades, which are huge cliffs of ancient lava flows, 400, 500, 600 feet high in places. One of them is right behind me here. We're going to get a better look at it in just a minute. We're going to be spending the whole afternoon exploring what's called Hook Mountain. Hook Mountain State Park adjoins Nyack Beach State Park here in Rockland County. And there's a loop trail that's about 6 miles long that I'm going to be exploring. So from the parking lot at Nyack Beach, there's a level, smooth path that runs along the west bank of the Hudson River here. We'll be taking that on the return leg, and we're going to be doing the Hook Mountain Summit and Plateau first. There's a connector trail from here over to what's called the Long Path, which runs across the whole west side of the Hudson River up through the Catskills and Shongunks from here, up through Bear Mountain and Harriman as well. So we'll be connecting with that. There's a fairly new connector trail from here to that long path. We can follow the long path across the summit of Hook Mountain, back down to this crushed stone walkway along the Hudson River, and do the last 2 miles back on level terrain. So I'm going to do the steeper and probably more interesting part of this hike first, and take in the views of the Hudson River from the top, and on the way back along the west bank southbound to where we're parked right now. So it's beautiful the whole way. I've done a little bit of the north end of this park, but not the whole thing, so I'm here to see the rest of it, take in the views, look at geology, plants, and anything else that comes along. Along this connector trail from Nyack Beach up to the long path, there's some huge tulip poplar trees, 4 or 5 feet in diameter, well over 100 years old. This guy here is probably 5 feet across. If I could measure them well, I would. They usually go fairly straight. This one's leaning just a little. I've seen my share of wild grapes or grapevines growing in the woods. This one takes the prize. This guy here is growing sideways and well up into the full sun environment of this talus slope. So grapes grow up trees, wild grapes grow up trees, and need to get a lot of sun to continue. If you get a mature forest, you don't see a lot of wild grape. This vine is going hundreds of feet up into this talus slope and well beyond my field of view. So a huge grapevine seeking out sun, seeking out these boulders. And well above here, just a little bit out of view, is the summit of Hook Mountain, the cliffs from which these boulders have tumbled down over the millennia. And our connector trail to the long path from Nyack Beach follows the bottom of this talus slope the entire distance. They've done a great job moving the larger rocks out of your way. It's pretty much on contour at this point. not a lot of ascent at this point. Interesting talus community here. Besides the grapevines, there's a whole bunch of sugar maple growing on this talus slope. There's some basswood and a whole bunch of tulip poplar. I'm used to finding black birch on a lot of the talus slopes in this area, but this particular rock, this dolerite or diabase rock, is volcanic in origin. And if you know anything about volcanic rocks, they're very high in nutrients that plants like. So this community of plants here is different than I normally find on a talus slope in this part of the country. A lot of the rocks around here are not high in nutrients. The granites and granitic gneisses and quartzites don't provide enough of the nutrients that these more demanding trees require. So you often don't find sugar maple on these talus slopes, or a tulip poplar, or a basswood. But very common along here. We're almost to the long path. We're gonna take in some more views and comment on what we find once we reach it. And after about less than a mile on the connector trail to the long path, and that connector trail is well blazed with white, we're on the long path heading north. Follows, looks like an old road, the old route of a road at one time, with hand stacked stones for the retaining wall, so it's probably been around pre-Civil War. And we've come up quite a bit in elevation here. And the good thing about hiking in late winter is you still have plenty of views. None of the trees have leafed out. A little bit of color on some of the red maples, and that's about all. But we lose that old road here, and we're going to be heading up to the most scenic part of this hike. And that's where the summit ridge of Hook Mountain continues for 2 miles, and there's a lot of open areas showing up on my satellite view that would be worthy of exploring. And plenty of panoramic views of the Tappan Zee and the Palisades and the Bear Mountain area to our north. And our views continue to unfold, and our forest has changed from sugar maple, basswood, and tulip poplar to mostly hickory up on this ridge. Look at a couple species right here. This pignut hickory has a bark that has an even texture, and often these little ridges will dead end into a square little dead end, like a dead end street almost. And that's not what we normally see on the mocker nut hickory, which could very well be growing on this hillside and has similar colored bark. The buds on this pignut hickory are quite a bit smaller than the mocker nut. These ones here are about 1/4 inch in size. And right next to it is our shagbark hickory. Even at a young age, it's quite shaggy. Bark flakes free easily. Shellbark hickory doesn't grow in this part of the country, and probably wouldn't be growing on a dry ridge top like this even if it did grow around here. But shellbark hickory does have bark that flakes free like this as well. Got a lot more information on these trees on my other channel. That channel is called Barking Up the Right Tree, BARKIN apostrophe up the right tree. I've got some nut fragments, or the remains of the nuts, of both these trees. On the right is the shagbark hickory nut, which has a really thick husk. It's probably almost 1/2 inch thick, 3/8 of an inch thick. And the husk of our pignut hickory isn't not even as thick as that US currency dime. The actual husk is very thin. Put this dime on edge here. You can see that. The husk of a bitternut hickory is also thin, but when you put the husk back together on a bitternut hickory, the top of it has ridges that stick up that look like a cross. They're both about the same size, about 1/2 inch to 1 inch long. They're both somewhat teardrop shaped. but the husks, or the ridges on the husks, are the giveaway, and the buds if you can find them. On a bitternut hickory are like a yellowish sulfur color, like the color of fool's gold. So they're easily distinguished by the buds and the husks on the nuts, but not necessarily by the bark. And just a few hundred feet from those pig nut and shagbark hickory trees, we do have a great example of the subtle difference in the bark between a pig nut and a mockernut hickory. This is a mockernut hickory. The bud is larger and it's slightly more pubescent or fuzzy. The branching is, there's less branches, but the branches are much thicker. So there's less branches per foot, or twigs per foot sticking out of the branches. And these ridges, they don't come to that dead end too often. There's one there that does. But usually they just continue the whole way down the tree. And it's like somebody took a marker and just kept zigzagging down the whole tree. And on the pig nut, it often stops and then starts again. And the nut fragments are often available even after the growing season's long over. Sometimes the nuts are long gone, but the nut fragment and the nut itself on the mockernut hickory is much larger and thicker than that of the pignut hickory. So that's about a 1/4 inch thick, not quite as thick as the husk of a shagbark hickory, but much thicker and much larger than that of the pignut. There's some more right here. And these scraggly stunted trees on the top of the cliffs here on Hook Mountain. Again, the fact that this is volcanic rock here, you get a somewhat different plant community. I was not expecting to find chickapin oak growing up here, but that's exactly what we have growing right here on top of this cliff. It has a very similar appearance to white oak in the color of the bark. But the bark tends to come loose a little bit easier. I can't really step down off this trail here because it's pretty dangerous down there. But I can see clearly that these leaves resemble those of a chestnut oak in their geometry. There's a few in the foreground here we can look at. But the bark is considerably different than the chestnut oak. We're getting near the summit of this mountain. We're starting to get some great views of the Tappan Zee Bridge. Pretty calm day on the Hudson River there. It's just a gentle breeze blowing up here on top of the mountain. And the sunnier it gets on top of Hook Mountain here, the more opportunities we have to find some sun-loving plants. And yes, this is common on this mountain. I saw it last time I was here. Is our prickly pear cactus. Pretty much growing on every ledge that had this full sun available for it. And it's surviving up here despite a lot of foot traffic, I'm sure. And these pads on the cactus will kind of fill in and stand up taller when it gets a little warmer. and the new ones will come up, and it gets bright yellow flowers in June. So we'll record this as we find it today, but I'm not surprised to find it on this end of the mountain. I found it last time I was here on the north end of this mountain, a couple miles from here. And pretty much on every ledge where there was enough sun for it to survive. It certainly won't grow in the shade of trees. So once the forest closes over, you would lose your prickly pear cactus, but there's plenty of places on this mountain where the soil is very thin and the trees aren't growing too fast. So I would expect it to continue thriving on this mountaintop for quite a few generations. And that's a 360-degree view from the summit of Hook Mountain. The ridge continues north from here. That's the highest point. It's over 700 feet. I didn't comment on that panoramic view because there was a lot of people looking for birds up there, and I didn't want to disturb them. So, but the view pans from the Tappan Zee Bridge north, and then a little bit of a forest interruption, and then the view continues up towards Rockland Lake and the Harriman State Park and Bear Mountain area. So, and the long path continues on this ridge. We're going to keep commenting on plants as we find them, including this hackberry growing up here. You know, I started this channel living in the Ohio Valley, and hackberry was very common. But I haven't found too much of it in southern New England, but it's growing up here with this unique bark with these tall ridges that look like corrugated cardboard almost. So hackberry is often found in the floodplains in the Ohio Valley, but I'm finding it on this ridgetop here, and it's often growing in old field situations as well. So let's just keep looking at this view. But a few surprises up here. I'm not surprised by the prickly pear this time because I found it on the other end of the mountain last time. I wasn't expecting to find chinkapin oak up here. I've been finding basswood growing right on this ridgetop, which isn't where I'm used to finding it, but that's where it's growing. So almost every south-facing ledge on this mountain is covered in prickly pear cactus, which blooms in June and gets a fruit that's edible after that. So in a survival situation, I don't know how tasty they are, but they would certainly be plentiful up on this mountaintop. And as we head north on the long path here, the view is continuous in early March here. During the summer months, you'd still get views in places along this trail, but not the whole way. So great time of year to be out here. It's a little cool today for this time of year, but after a mild winter, midwinter, it's kind of evening out now. A little rain and snow mix in the forecast tonight, and again in a few days. So January and February were well above average in this area. March looks like it might actually be below average, so we'll see how that goes. We're going to keep looking at the views as we go here. We're about halfway through this 6-mile loop, and we'll keep taking in the scenery as it comes along here. And I know there's a place further along where we can get a really good look at the cliffs, not just from above but from the side as well. So we'll make sure we stop there and study these unique rock formations. And as we approach the north end of Hook Mountain, some really good views afford you if you follow some unofficial trails that are pretty obvious just to the east of the long path. I'm going to just enjoy this view. We're right on top of these huge cliffs. I believe there's a place we can see them as we're on top, but I know we can see them from the base of the mountain too as we continue this loop in a clockwise direction. We'll get out the map later. I didn't have time to print it off. I'll look at it later and we'll review the route we did, but this is well marked, easy to follow, and it's a well-known hike. So this isn't a hike where you would have to really be a good off-trail hiker or a good navigator, but just one who likes incredible scenery really close to a huge population center. And we'll approach the very north end of Hook Mountain here. This ridge has continued on with expansive views for about 10 minutes here. Again, the long path doesn't come up here, but there's unofficial herd paths that do. And the long path is just to our west. So, incredible little point of land here. We can start to see some of the boulder piles that we hiked, or similar to the boulder piles we hiked by at the start of this hike. We can get a pretty good look at the actual cliffs of dolerite rock here. So there we are. Wow, what a face right there. You would be hard pressed to find a safe way to get up this mountain. Even where the cliff stops, it's still huge piles of boulders. But our easy part of the walk will be coming soon. We'll zoom in on the walking path that follows the Hudson River here. 600-700 feet below us looks like it's crushed stone. I haven't actually hiked it before. I've only seen the start of it from either end. That should be easy walking. I still got a couple hours of daylight left, and I have my headlamp with me as well. If I were to run out of time to hike that with good daylight on a cloudy day here, it's level with good footing. I could easily do it with the headlamp. Let's just pan around one more time at this view looking east. Then we're going to look north. And the Hudson River is at its widest point here, and its narrowest point is just 15-20 miles north of here at Bear Mountain, where it's very narrow, just like a quarter-mile wide with sheer cliffs on either side. So just an amazing place to hike. Plenty of day hiking opportunities all around this area. The New York, New Jersey Trail Conference has done a great job building these trails, maintaining them, and creating that new link trail between Nyack Beach and the one we're on right now. And the long path intersects a road that goes down to the Hudson River here, where you can gain access to the trail back to Nyack Beach. And it is along this access road here we can get a really good look right back up at what we were just looking down from. It's got to be 500 or 600 feet of sheer cliff. And I don't think the camera can even do it justice, but let's just zoom in. The point of land we were just on is above those rusty colored cliffs. Obviously you want to use extreme caution at the tops of those cliffs for that reason. And the views that were to be had almost the whole length of the summit of Hook Mountain are to be had along the pathway back to Nyack Beach State Park. This is mostly crushed stone and level. There's a couple little slopes like behind us here that are paved. And that crushed stone path, and it looked like it was paved going up to Haverstraw, but I'm not sure if it was paved the whole way. So certainly could be done on a bicycle, probably just a road bike. I don't think you need a mountain bike to do it. It's pretty smooth. Just put a little less air in your tires. I got the map pulled up of this hike. What we're going to do is try to keep the reflection to a minimum here. We started where it says Nyack Beach State Park. There's a says seasonal parking fee. That's about where I started. And the yellow line shows the new trail that goes from that state park over to the green blazed long path, which has got the LP symbol on it. We continued north. The stars are the overlooks that we stopped at. Some of them had the cactus growing on them. And some surprise trees I wasn't expecting to find. We continued along that long path to the very top. And there's a little star there at the top where I thought the best overlook was. It was on that unofficial trail that's shown in yellow and red just to the east of the long path. Long path descends down with some well-built stone stairs in places. And then our route follows what's called Landing Road down to the Nyack River Trail, which follows this west bank of the Hudson River right back to where we started. And we're going to keep recording the beauty of this trail as we go, but I may not do much more commentary at this point in the day. And that sure was pretty walking that last couple miles back on this level trail. Take one last look up at Hook Mountain and look forward to doing some more hikes in this area. There's many more hikes along these Palisades in New Jersey and in New York. And the Bear Mountain Harriman area has plenty of hikes with plenty of views, just like this park does. There's one I've been wanting to do for a few years. I don't know if I'll get it done during the winter months this year, and that's Scenic Mountain, which is about 20 miles north of here. It has incredible views, lots of ledge. That's one I'd want to do in the cooler months. There's quite a few rattlesnake dens on that mountain. I don't want to have to think about where those snakes are when I'm hiking. So that's one that's on my to-do list. It's been on my list for a while. But we'll continue on with these adventures as the spring and summer move on in 2023.